I think people have been lured into this, the current philosophy that the world is only what you see and what you can measure, what you can count. So I feel that our world is suffering because it has pretty much lost its soul. And you can't see everything through a telescope or microscope. And you can't touch and feel everything that exists. The soul is not something you can grasp easily, but nevertheless, it's one of the most important things, if you can use that word, in the world, in our lives. So I do think if we could recover our soul, our depth, our capacity for relationship and empathy, only that kind of thing can really get the world out of its mess right now.
Thomas Moore, welcome to the show. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
I suppose I'm most excited about my family. My daughter continues to sing. That was an early video of hers, and she continues to become more and more sophisticated. And my wife is coming into her own as a painter, and my stepson is a designer and an architect, and he's really moving along in his work as well. So this is all exciting to me. I have a book coming out next week, so the whole thing, our family is very creative and making contributions. So that's the most exciting thing to me.
I love that. Yeah, I have a strong notion of family. And just to give some people some context, we just played Light of Your Soul by Ajeet, your daughter. And right before recording, we set the intention, and one of those was to evoke magic into this episode. And right as I was doing the research preparing for this interview, I found out that she was your daughter, and it just struck me like I was like paralyzed for a moment, because when I was in college, my first year of college, I'm 24 now. My first year of college, I went through a deep, dark night of the soul, and I went through a whole awakening that, people listening to the show may know about. And my mom, she was very present in that journey. And she was, while we were living in California, she became a Kundalini yoga instructor. So when I was going through all of this in college, she came and took care of me, nurtured my soul, which I needed. And she passed me her playlist of meditation. So it was a bunch of mantras, beautiful music. And I set myself the goal to meditate for 100 days straight. And I would use that playlist for those 100 days. And primarily Ajeet's music was on that playlist. So that was almost 4 to 5 years ago. And already we can feel the magic. And diving right into it, you mentioned your family. I wanted to ask you, do you feel that our souls choose our family?
That's a very difficult question, because there's so many big questions that I don't know if we are in a position to answer. So my usual response is to say, I don't know, because I don't. And I like to affirm what I don't know first. I'm afraid, I fear that there are many people who pursue a spiritual path who too quickly say that they think they know what's going on. But I'd look backwards too. I like to look back, and it certainly seems, in my experience of the family, that both my family, my parents, and the family I was born into, and the family that I am fortunate to be in now as a father, they do have definitely a feeling of design and purpose to them, both of them. And so, in fact, I'm I've been toying with writing a book. I've written about 100 pages of a book called The Book of Your Life, because I do feel that it's almost as though you can find a book that tells you who you are and what you've been and maybe what you will be. And so my answer is intuitively yes to your question, but at the same time, I don't know.
I love that. Yeah. Admitting that we really don't know. We're making a lot of things up as we go, but there is this mind, the gnosis mind, the mind that knows, a higher self, the soul, which we'll start to begin to play around with. I would love to get into this because I feel that right now the world is missing this pulse on the soul. And we're going through a lot of chaotic times, a lot of transition and change and evolution. Where do you see the soul of the world right now currently?
It seems quite hidden. I think people have been lured into this, the current philosophy. It's been going on for a long time, that the world is only what you see and what you can measure, what you can count. And quantification is a big way of being in the world today. I can't remember who it was. I was reading someone recently that said that life is not about arithmetic. It's not about how much you add or subtract. It's something else. It's another quality. So I feel that our world is suffering because it has pretty much lost its soul. Yeah, that's why I do all this work, write too many books. I do that because someone has to keep at it and keep it in mind that there are other things that are important, and you can't see everything through a telescope or microscope, and you can't touch and feel everything that exists. The soul is not something you can grasp easily, but nevertheless, it's one of the most important things, if you can use that word, in the world, in our lives. So I do think if we could recover our soul, our depth, our capacity for relationship and empathy, those sorts of things, I think that only that kind of thing can really get the world out of its mess right now.
And drawing upon mythology, you said that the most important story for the development of the soul is the ancient story of Eros and the psyche. Do you mind explaining to us what that story is about?
Sure. This is an ancient story that comes down to us from Rome in the 2nd century. It's very old. And it's a story about, it's an allegory, which means that the characters represent an idea, each one of them. And they are called Eros, who means love and desire and pleasure, and Psyche, which is the Greek word for soul. And the story is very complicated. As I say, it's an allegory, and you can look at it step by step and see how it develops. But basically, Psyche has an opportunity. She actually is going to commit suicide. She jumps off a mountain and she lands in this enchanted land and finds this young man in a house, and she begins sleeping with him, and she becomes pregnant quickly. And but her sisters are jealous of her. That's a typical motif in fairy tales. And so they convince her that he's really a monster and that she should put some light on because she had been in the dark. And she puts an oil lamp on, and she sees that actually he's quite wonderful and beautiful. And she's made a mistake. But he gets up and goes away. So there's a separation of the soul and Eros. Love and the soul get separated. I think that's a situation that many of us are in. And in order to reconnect, the goddess, Venus, who was the goddess of love and sexuality, gives her trials and challenges that she has to handle. And with the help of certain natural figures like ants and other figures, that she's able to do that and eventually reconnect with love. So it's a story about how our love our love needs soul.
Mm.
Sometimes we love the wrong things and the wrong people and the wrong ideas. And we need a soul in order to guide us, a depth of insight. And sometimes we have a loss of love, that we don't have love in our life. And sometimes we find it in the wrong places and keep searching for it and feel, a lot of people feel uh, that they've been deprived because they can't feel love in their lives. So this story is really about how we might be able to get both love and soul together.
And you also talk a lot about this concept of soulmates. You even have a whole book about it. And, merging again this love with the soul, how do you see the play out process when two souls come together and there seems to be a spark or whatever it is, a divine encounter? What is that truly going on from maybe a soul level? What is actually going on?
I think what happens is that we're just going along in life usually and doing our thing, and usually it's a person that attracts us somewhere along the line. And it's quite unreasonable, that attraction. And some people would say it's an illusion, which it is in many ways. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that we don't know what's going on. We're overwhelmed by the love aspect instead of the mind aspect of life in that moment. And it may not be a person. It could be something else, like a job or a way of life. When I was 13, I was overwhelmed with the desire to become a Catholic priest, and I left home to pursue that. That took a lot because I love my family, and I left home. It was
That
hard.
was 13 years as a Catholic monk.
Yeah, I was 13
Wow.
years a Catholic monk, and that was great. That was a great part of my life, and I think that having had that life allows me to do the work I do today and to live the life I live today. So I'm very grateful for it, but it was very painful, and I'm still homesick, having left home at that time. But it's a falling in love. It's Eros coming into life, and I think that it's important to follow that Eros, but you have to do it with awareness, because you could be making a mistake, or sometimes that Eros comes along and it's like a trial. Trial version doesn't really work. So you have to be aware of what's happening. But I do think you have to pay attention when Eros strikes. The mythological image is that Eros is the small figure who has a bow and arrow, and sometimes a flaming arrow, and shoots it into your heart. And I think most of us know what that feels like, to have that arrow come into our heart. And as I say, you have to be cautious with it as much as you can. But on the other hand, you really have to follow through to some extent on whenever the arrow hits, because you don't know, that could be your life. That could be your whole future in that situation. And that's what I did. And I left it after 13 years. I left that life. Happily left it, but also I had no regrets. I really got a great deal. I still try to live a monk's life when I can in my own way today. So that was a wonderful experience in many ways, challenging in others. And that's just the way it is with Eros and the soul. So the next time, I was shot by other arrows, and that led me in the shape of my life. And I think that that's how it works with people, that we have to pay attention when love is present and strikes us, thoughtfully, carefully, but pay attention and try, if we can, to follow through on it. And if it doesn't last forever, that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, and just drawing upon your teachings, I realized I had this insight of, a lot of these moments in our life that shift us to a new direction, that change completely our career or maybe our pursued path with one person, and all of a sudden we get that arrow and we have to go to another place. You've said many of these times it is sort of this whisper from our soul that is sort of seeking out this transition. Maybe we're in a place or a moment where it wasn't going to be fulfilling for our soul to be there. I remember when you were talking about getting into tenure and then you got rejected, and all of a sudden you said, I need to shift my career. These moments that happen in your life, and also in the thousands or hundreds of patients you've had in your psychotherapy sessions, why are these moments of our greatest challenge actually the biggest gift that we have from a soul level?
I think the thing is we do, I think the best way to live is to follow rather than to lead. So we follow the promptings that come from the world, and from life, and from inside ourselves. We follow those promptings. And you have to test them, and you don't want to be under the illusion that you must stick with them forever. Nothing is forever in that way. It's for the next part of life, the next move. So I think you can do that. You can trust those promptings. Now, the exact way to live them out may not be really clear at first. It may take you a while to find out how to put that prompt into life. And I think that has to be done creatively and carefully. And if you do that, then what you're doing, you're letting your life be shaped by something other than your ego, yourself. You're not in charge, exactly. You're responsible, and you try to do it at the best you can, but still you're responding rather than making something. You're responding. And I think that's the clue. That's the way to live. It's to respond to the inclinations that come to you, and they are erotic in the broad sense of the word. I don't mean sexual. I mean erotic in the sense of desire, of leading you in a direction of your soul's desire, not just your own small desire, but the desire of your fate and destiny, which is expressions of your soul. So I would say that this is not the way modern people tend to live, but I think it's a good way to go.
And from the blueprint of the moment that we were born, I'm just really curious about this, because it almost seems that when we are born, we sort of forget a lot of where we came from, where we were without these bodies. And as we grow up, as we get programmed, as we go through our school system, as we're taught to go through this path that society has sort of set out for us, this soul desire sort of gets suppressed, or it might get hidden. What is your process with people of just sort of uncovering that desire again? Because also there's religions out there that teach us that desire is a bad thing, or maybe in our interpretation of it with Buddhism. But how do we sort of start uncovering, digging up those desires and truly listening to them?
Well, I think you can have a habit of appreciating desire. I don't think that the Buddhist idea is really contrary to that. I think what they are talking about is more craving and maybe compulsion. That's compulsiveness can certainly lead you astray, but desire itself is something that's not so negative, and it's really it's the power and the energy of life itself. That's the way the ancients talked about Eros, that it was what created the world. It's the dynamic that creates life and creates the world. I see it as a creative principle, keeping us, allowing us to keep living into life, and for life itself, even on the planet, to keep moving. I think all of that is Eros. That's what the ancient Greeks taught, and I think it's a very good insight that there's a desire there to move along. And so what I do is, my thought is that that we should learn to follow desire thoughtfully. So it's possible to be misled, because it's hard to know sometimes what is desire or what is a compulsion, or what is something that is based on some neurotic aspect of our character. So we have to sort it out. But once you see it, I think you can see it as something leading you on. It can be rather faint. For example, when I left the Catholic monastic life I was in, it wasn't clear. Like, I didn't know why I wanted to leave exactly, but I knew that the feeling I had was trustworthy. It seemed to be very certain and sure, and I thought I could follow it. And that's what I did. I followed that. I didn't know why exactly. I found the whys came later, but I followed that, and I've done that throughout my life. And this is an ancient teaching about Eros. Sometimes the image given is of an angel. This is both in Christianity and in other religions. There's a wonderful Sufi story about the angel appearing to this man who has a job and he likes what he's doing. The angel appears and tells him to jump in the river. And he jumps in the river because he wants to follow the angel. And he goes down the river and is fished out by somebody who gives him a different way of life. And so on. He does that about 5 times in his life, following the angel's word. I think that's a very interesting story. That's from, as I say, the Sufis. And it is about this theme that you listen when the angel speaks. The angel could be Eros. Angels and Eros look very much alike in art. They have wings. They appear sort of miraculously. And that's the way it happens, I think. Eros appears and you move on, and your life then is in movement. And I think that's another key aspect of living, is that we are in movement. We're not static. If you find yourself doing the same thing for too long, it's probably a good idea to see if there's some desire there to move on. And because it's the nature of living to move, to be in movement. I don't mean crazy, where you're always doing something different, but there's movement of some kind, internal movement or physical movement. You move somehow. And Eros is the generator of that movement.
I've often heard that the soul is sort of this higher entity of ours that is wired for growth. And a lot of the experiences that come through us are that soul seeking out growth. But also, I've asked myself, what happens in those moments where you are stagnant, or where you're not moving, or where you feel that you're not going anywhere? Is there a buildup? Is that a buildup of the soul sort of waiting to shake you up so you can grow again? Or how do we manage these moments of a lot of growth, and then maybe there's a moment of stagnancy or stuckness that we have in our life?
I think it's like living a day. You're hungry for a while, then you eat lunch and you're not hungry anymore. You go through these changes, and it's quite natural. So it's very natural to be maybe to be in a position where you suddenly feel stagnant, and you feel like you want something to change, and it isn't. Well, that dissatisfaction is a very important emotion. And so it has its place. And I would never suggest that we try to get dissatisfaction out of our lives. It does a lot for us. Or other negative feelings that you feel maybe that your life isn't worth anything. That can be a very good moment to have that feeling. So I would tend to not divide these emotions and feelings into negative and positive too easily, but rather understand that, like I say, hunger and satisfaction of food is something we do every day, and that's the way our emotions are. And we pay attention and we appreciate the ones that may feel negative, but that judgment just gets in the way. We don't have to make that judgment.
Going through your enormous research and experience with the religions, I read that you read the Tao Te Ching once every month. And, that is a text that talks about the flow of a life. And I'd love to know what has been your biggest insight regarding this natural flow that is part of life, that we're connected to, that we are. What have you learned about that book of teachings?
The Tao Te Ching has been a very important guide for me, but so have many other religious texts and the ones I grew up in. I grew up as a Catholic, as I've been saying, and yes, I no longer practice that the way I did exclusively, but it's still there, and I don't want to. It enriches my life even today. But the Tao Te Ching has come along and really given me a new way of thinking about many things. For example, one of the statements from the Tao Te Ching is allow things to take their course. And that has guided me a lot. Allow things to take their course. Let them just move along. Don't interfere. Don't try to make everything right. Take it as it is and kind of move with it and flow with it if you can. And I know that can be expressed in ways that are absurd, but I think there's a great deal of wisdom in it, especially if you put all the sayings of the Tao Te Ching together and take it as a whole rather than just taking one line separately. I have a quotation from the Tao Te Ching in my book coming up, The Eloquence of Silence, a statement I can paraphrase where it says that a house is no good unless it has windows, and a room is no good unless it has a door. These are the empty spaces that are necessary in life. So I think that's really a good, that's one of my favorite passages from this new book of mine, from the Tao Te Ching, that you need doors and windows in your life. You need openings where things can come and go. You have to allow some of the things you're doing in your life to exit. You need a door, let them get out of there. You need windows to be able to see the world outside yourself and to open the windows up and get some fresh air into your life so you don't get stifled and stale. So I think it's a great image and you can take it in so many different ways as kind of a poetry. There's such a thing as kind of a spiritual poetry. That is poetry that is guiding. It's a guiding poetry. And that's what I think most religious texts are, spiritual poetry. They're taken literally, which is a great misfortune in the history of religion. But I think they are spiritual poetry, guiding us to every step of the way, so that we could read almost any spiritual text on any day, and it would give us insight into how we can proceed with our lives.
Insight. You said, don't seek for proof, look for insight.
Yes.
And staying on that analogy of the doors and the windows, I love that. But I also had the image of, we sometimes say we want the new opportunity, we want the new relationship, our doors are wide open on a conscious level, and then subconsciously we might have that door completely shut or our heart completely closed, and we're not able to attract those new opportunities into our life. And also drawing on the big volume of teachings of Carl Jung that you've been really influenced by, he talks a lot about that unconscious. So what do you have to say about when our unconscious does not match our conscious wishes and desires?
You work it out. There are no easy answers to it, but yeah, I think, for example, for myself, part of my unconscious, to use Jung's word, comes a lot from my growing up in an Irish Catholic family, which was wonderful and warm. And I spent a lot of time even now throughout my life I have in Ireland. I just got back from Ireland about a day ago. And I feel like that's my home in a way. But it also has a really dark shadow, Ireland. It has been very puritanical, and they drink too much, way too much. And there's a lot of what they call Irish guilt Catholic guilt, and they can't deal with sex at all. I mean, there are a lot of problems being Irish Catholic and my heritage. That's my unconscious, you might say. It's part of my unconscious life. Ireland is part of my unconscious. So what do? I go over there. I get to know it. I enter the storm. I go
Face the shadow.
I spend time there, and I feel it, and I get to know who I am by being there. I recognize so much of it as what my family was, and I understand their roots and where they came from. So it's like entering my own unconscious life by visiting Ireland, and I love it. I really love it, and so I enjoy being there. But at the same time, I cringe when I see all those elements that are part of my own family background and part of my unconscious challenge, the part of me that I have to struggle with so often, have all my life. So I think that's what you do. You go into it and you deal with it.
Yeah. And in this spiritual sort of self-help landscape, we hear a lot the words integration, healing. Do you see that the soul is something that we need to heal or integrate? Or how do you see it working around that when you're sort of getting to know someone's shadow and you're working through those and navigating through those stories that they've told themselves? Do you try to heal the soul? Do you try to nourish the soul? What is that process sort of look like?
Well, it sounds very much like what I do as a therapist. Mm-hmm. So as a therapist, I never really think of myself as a healer, as healing. I really don't. I think what I do is help people see what their soul wants. That's a statement that a lot of my colleagues and I used to use in the years past a lot. We ask, what does the soul want? And that's a good question to ask because it's a deeper matter, a deeper desire is what we're looking for. So I'm looking more for, with my clients, who are they? What is their soul like? What does your soul want? And what gets in the way of you getting what your soul wants? Because if you're getting in the way of that, that's causing your problem. That's causing your symptoms and your pain. Mm-hmm. So the question is not really to heal yourself so much as to respond to that question. What is your soul looking for that you're afraid maybe to give it? Does that require a change in your life that you have found to be very difficult to do? Are you complacent? Are you stuck in certain areas that you just can't imagine living differently? One of my teachers, James Hillman, actually more a friend than a teacher, he wrote in one of his books that in therapy, the whole point is to get a new narrative, a new story. To be free to live a narrative that is not so painful. So that's what I do. I talk about stories and I work with dreams primarily, and the dreams provide so much imagery to guide us in directions we would never have thought of, and I find them to be very, very effective. And so most of my work is dream work, and I take those dreams to be reflections. They're like little movies about what the soul is doing, what's going on. And you can see in those dreams where the dreamer is resisting what the soul wants. You see desire in the dream, and you see in the dream the dreamer resisting it all. So it's quite clear, really. You can just look at that and say, well, let's explore that. Is this happening in life too?
Yeah, and before we go deeper into the soul world, because I definitely want to talk about that with you, I want to stay on that topic of the stories and developing a new story. Because I feel like humanity right now is at a moment in time in history that we're sort of creating a new story and we're sort of leaving an old story behind. What story is, in your eyes, being sort of developed right now as we're transitioning from an old paradigm. A lot of systems might collapse in the next couple of years. We're already seeing a lot of that start to happen. What new story does humanity need for this era of what a lot of people are calling a golden age, or just a new time for humanity?
It needs love. That's the whole thing. That's what all the religions teach, as far as I can see, and I think they're right. We are afraid and that of so many things, and that fear turns into hatred, and hatred is creating such difficulty across our planet, across the planet, and not just hatred of other people, but we need to love our world, our planet, and the world in which we live, the natural world we live in, the animals around us, and the plants. We need to love all this. Love will motivate us to take care of it all, and we will be in mutual relationship. As it is now, we're exploiting the natural world, only exploiting it, and in a way exploiting people. That's what we do. We don't really love people. We don't love people who are different. Why not? Seems to me it's so obvious. You go and travel to another culture, and it's so interesting and fascinating how they live. Why don't you love that? Why hate it? Why set up this barrier between you and another people? Is it because that newness is too hard to handle? I think a lot of people have been brought up to fear otherness, however it appears. So if we have a new world taking shape now, it's got to be loving the world in which we live in all those different ways. If that happens, we're in good shape. If it doesn't happen, I think it's over.
Yeah. Anima mundi, the soul of the world. How are we wounding right now the soul of the world, and how can we start to sort of nourish the soul of our planet, of the world right now?
You were talking about unconsciousness before. There's a kind of raw unconsciousness, which means there are many, many things in this life that we have to be taught. It's so important to teach others. So important for parents to teach children about how to relate to nature, how to relate to animals. So many parents are afraid of all of this and have never been taught themselves. And so they pass on a kind of violence in regard to nature and to animal life and to natural life. And so we need an alternative there, but that has to be taught. We have to be taught to be sensitive to these things. We have to be taught to have a sense of ethics. That doesn't come naturally. The natural thing seems to be very raw and undeveloped and violent. So that violence has got to be turned into creative force. You don't get rid of it entirely, you transform it into a creative force. And if we had this great desire to live in a world at peace with nature and with the world in which we live and we're part of, then I think everything would change for the better. But if we continue to live unconsciously and we continue to raise children that way, we're not going to get anywhere. And we are being self-destructive right now, so that's not a good sign.
Self-destructed, yes, for sure. And violence, war, all these things that we've been seeing, since the beginning of time for humanity, are these aspects that are also part of the soul that it incorporates to grow in its process, or is that something that we acquired being here on the planet?
I think that I've done quite a bit of work on the issue of power and sadism and that kind of thing. And I feel that power is something that we all need. We need it all the time. It doesn't have to be destructive. It can be very creative, but it is power and it's force. And we need to be able to appreciate force. You don't need to be passive in order to be a decent person. It's not that. You have to find ways to be creative and powerful and to make a mark and to speak up when things don't look right, and to be to get your own creative spark out there in the world. That's a kind of it's not violence, but it is in the same genre as violence, on the same spectrum. So you have violence and aggression on one side, and that's very destructive. But if we could bring that down, not to get rid of it, but to transform it into a greater force, I think that we might be able to accomplish a great deal. I would never suggest becoming passive and quiet, and to go in that direction. The direction we need to go is toward more power. Each of us having more power in expressing it.
How do you create alchemy in your life?
Well, alchemy is a very interesting thing. Alchemy, there's so much to say about it. It's like astrology in the sense that it uses the natural world as and how it looks. And we have a lunar nature that is also important, a light that's not quite as bright as the sun. Yeah. On and on we could go, endless. How we could look at the physical things in the world and see them poetically as being aspects of the psyche.
And it's learning how to read those things poetically, not just seeing them as matter, as form, but as you're saying, like the ancient astrologers would look at the sky, and like we look at the sky now, we don't even see the stars because of the pollution. But anyways, they would see a sky lit up and then create stories and archetypes and incredible things. I wanted to ask you, how do you create magic in your life with your black obsidian stone? This is a very interesting story that I uncovered.
Yes, I studied what's called natural magic, magia naturalis, natural magic, which was common especially in the European Renaissance, or like around the 15th century, especially in Europe, natural magic. And I've studied that. I wrote my dissertation on it. I mean, I really got into natural magic.
You went deep into it.
I did. And so It is what it means. Natural magic means it's not anything supernatural. It's natural. It's ordinary. It's like using things, ordinary things, but using them for their sort of hidden powers, powers that would not be obvious, hidden powers. So one of the things that the natural magician did, he would get a stone made out of obsidian, which is a volcanic glass-like rock, molten rock, and it reflects, and it reflects very clearly and beautifully. And I don't think I have it with me right now, but I usually have my obsidian stone close by. I have several different sizes, and they're shiny black stones. And these have been traditionally used to look into, to activate your imagination around a particular issue in your life. I've been saying all along that I'm interested in how images can be related to the conduct of our lives, not just in themselves, but how they relate to how we live our lives. And that's what this obsidian stone does. It was used by one of these magicians who's in England, whose name was John Dee, who was living around the time of Queen Elizabeth I, and he advised her. She would come to him, and he would check out with this obsidian stone to see what he saw there. And what you do is you look into the stone, you might see some images, like looking at clouds, and you look at a cloud and you say, oh, there's a horse. It's not a horse, but that's what you see in the cloud. It's a similar thing in the obsidian stone. You see these images. And what I do, I get into a little bit of a very slight trance by looking into this obsidian stone and those images. I allow myself to kind of lose my normal thinking self and go into the stone and be affected by it. And if someone, especially if usually another person has asked me to look into it, they ask me questions and I answer from deep inside the stone. I don't answer from way back, waking mind. So I answer from that place, and that image there keeps me anchored to it. And I answer it more as the stone speaking. I'm not pretending that. That's where I am. I'm deep in the stone. And what comes out of it, I find, is useful. It's a kind of guidance that is not. It's more deeply intuitive rather than. I use that word just to make it sound more rational than it really is. But it's in that direction. It's like a deep intuition that you get from looking in the stone, and I use it regularly.
Yeah. So you're sort of, in a way, merging your consciousness with this consciousness of the stone, and the stone itself is holding wisdom in it. Is that a property of the obsidian stone? Is that what's going on there?
I don't know. I don't know. You could look at it that way. I don't. You could look at it that way. I see the stone as a way of establishing a relationship between me and the world around me that is more intense and deeper than my usual way of thinking. So the stone takes me to another place where I have the power of being able to maybe glimpsing the future more than I would normally. See, generally speaking, I think that's very important for us to develop our sense of prophecy. I think, and I know it's hard for a modern person to hear that, but I don't mean it really in a crazy way. All I mean is that it's a natural thing we could do. We all have it to some extent. We can kind of imagine what's going to happen and have a good sense of what's coming up. Well, with that stone, I can go further than if I just stand back. It helps me go further into that sense of prophecy, which is a very natural thing. That's why it's called natural magic. There's nothing unnatural about it. It's a very ordinary thing we can all do. But sometimes some sort of craft, some method helps, rather than just sitting down and saying, I want to think about the future. The whole ritual of using a stone can help us go deeper into it.
Yeah, we had on Dr. Dean Radin on the show. He talks about real magic. And in his book, he does talk about the power of our intention and creating sort of a sacred ritual, which we sort of did at the beginning of this podcast. We created a space, we meditated together, we listened to music, and then we went into it through an expanded mind, through an expanded consciousness. And that's sort of what you're doing in this process with the stone. And people can probably use different properties or different scenarios. I think also, would you recommend people to find their own rhythm or find their own ritual that they could take part in? How would you advise people to do that?
Find your own way, whatever works for you. And that doesn't insult your intelligence. This is not trying to do something really, goofy. It's not that. This is completely compatible with a very sharp scientific mind, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to expand your mind beyond science so that you can see that there are other things going on in this world than we can easily explain. And just like astrology, an astrologer could really astound you with what they see in your chart. How that works, I don't think anyone knows or should know. It's not about knowing how.
Yeah.
I always tell people that's the wrong question. If that's what you're asking, you're in the wrong place. You should be rather just learning how to do it so that it really does something for you. And that's how I feel about using this obsidian stone. It's not a huge thing in my life, but it allows me to have, I've studied magic. I'd like to be able to do it and not just talk about it.
Yeah. Dean also, he during the podcast, he showed us the spoon that he bent with his mind through magic. And I'm really interested. I'm passionate about psychic abilities and uncovering sort of beyond the five senses. We've been told, we've been put in these boxes of we're just meat suits with five senses, but we're much more than that. We can access wisdom from higher dimensions. We can see into the future. We can have premonitions. We can go into the dream world and have lucid dreams. Like, there's so much that we can develop in our capacity. And I love that you're giving us sort of this blueprint of what is possible when we're also bridging the scientific mind with natural magic. So I'd love to know, when you're in that trance state, when you're in that space, what sort of questions are you asking yourself to sort of guide your soul, your next moves into the future?
Well, how would I put it? Normally, I usually go to the stone when we're traveling to try to give a sense of what to expect for our travels. Mm-hmm. Although I have had some rather extraordinary events, different things with the stone that kind of scary almost.
You can share that all here. We're open to anything if you are open.
Well, I'll give you an example. One time, my daughter's, quite a number of years ago, my daughter's friend had disappeared and the police were involved, and the police pretty much had determined that she had been murdered. And so my daughter was very upset, and she asked me to look at the stone. And I told her, I don't usually do things, like this is pretty serious. I don't usually do that. I usually look at the journey we're going to take. But she said, do it anyway. So I looked in the stone and I said, I don't know. It seems to me the stone is saying that she's on a bus somewhere. She's not dead. And I said, that's hard to say because I'm just going by what I see in the stone, and that's a big thing to say. Yeah. But I said, that's what I see. Take it for what it's worth. And sure enough, a little bit later, they found she had got on a bus and to leave her family and was across the country and was safe, perfectly safe. So I don't know. What do you say about that? I've had many, actually quite a few experiences very similar with the stone. So I take it seriously, and I think that the limits of what we can know that way are unknown. But at the same time, at the beginning of this broadcast, you said He used the word humor. I noticed that because humor is very important to me. I take this stone with a great deal of humor. I don't get heavy and serious about it. Not that I don't do it seriously, but that I keep there's this humor that attaches to it that I appreciate. So that's my main attitude. My feeling tone of the work with the stone is more humor than isn't this fantastic?
Yeah. And most of the times I've seen in my personal experience, when we're in that playfulness is when most of the magic actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that in your life as well?
Oh yes, yeah. Yeah, you need a playful attitude. It's play. That's what it is. From one point of view, there have been really some excellent books written about this. Religion is play, essentially. It's a form of playing. And play is serious. It's very important in human life. But still, it's play. And I think that work with the stone, to me, is definitely play.
Yeah, yeah. And I love one of the definitions or sort of ways that you've described religion, which was, and this may have changed over the years, but one I recently heard from you was that religion to you is about sort of reestablishing a relationship to the mystery, the mysterious in the world. Do you still see it that way? And how can you sort of help people redefine what religion is? I know this is a big topic, but religion is sometimes very triggering for people to hear, and they don't want to see, they want to keep things in boxes with religion. So there's mysteries around the world. You just described the big mystery. How could have you known that she was on the bus? Or some people also, how could they have known that they dreamt about this and then it happened? Right. There's a lot of phenomena like this. So how does religion relate to the mysteries of life?
Mystery is one of those words. I don't know if it was one of the M's you mentioned at the beginning. I think so.
First one.
Mystical, mystery. There are other words that are like myth
and magic.
Yeah, so they're all I think related. I mean, the etymologies of those words is highly questionable, but I think they're close to related. And so with mystery, what we're dealing with is what we don't know, and it's very important that we don't know too much. I think that I know we make a big deal of wanting to be educated. And of course, I was in school for 35 years. I can't talk about that. But I at the same time, I feel that there are so many things that are unknown, and those are very important to us, those mysteries. And I think that religion was created to deal with the mysteries. Obviously, I'm not talking about institutional religion as we know it in the 21st century or the 20th century, certainly. I think that kind of religion really lost it all. They lost the relation to mystery. They wanted to explain everything. Just the opposite. I think religion lost its soul, really, at that point. Although when you look at history of religions, they weren't pure for very long. They don't last very long. They quickly become the thing that they're supposed to not be doing. So I'm not too happy with religion very much. I agree with many people who don't like it. On the other hand, to me, it's everything. It's my field. I love it. I love being my field is religious studies. That's what my PhD is. I love it. I wouldn't want anything else. But not the institutional religion, but religion as something is natural. It's a thing that people do, which is they relate to the mysteries around them. They relate to them. They don't explain them. They relate to them. So they might create a ritual. If they don't know looking up at the moon and wonder why is the moon getting bigger and then it gets smaller, instead of trying to explain it, what they might do is set up a Stonehenge. They're all over the world, different kinds of Stonehenges, where you set up rocks where you can measure and know ahead of time when the moon is going to be at a certain point or when certain planets are appearing, when the year is starting, when summer is coming. All of those things, they can be ritualized without being explained. I think not explaining, but responding to the mysteries is what religion is, essentially.
Yeah.
Best I
Yeah.
can come up with. And I've done a lot of study, I have to tell you, about religions.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And it almost seems like in the Western world now, when we come across a mystery that we don't know how to explain, we go to the new God, science, and we go, no, we're gonna take all our knowledge on biology, on physics, on any sort of scientific field, and figure this problem out. And yeah, we've solved a lot of those problems. We've solved a lot of things like that, and understood things in a different way. Do you think there's ever going to be a mystery about life that we're not going to be able to understand or know?
There are all kinds of mysteries now, and I think there always will be. I hope there will be. Otherwise, a religion is out, and I have to get another degree of something.
PhD in?
No, I think that where we're headed. I wonder. I mean, one way I imagine a direction for us to go is where we could revise our scientific way of thinking, so that we don't make it so exclusively materialistic. I think it's very possible to have a non-materialistic science, and to continue doing all the work we're doing in science, which is really amazing, but but not separate it from religion. It's Jim, that the astronomer Carl Sagan, who was very popular. You may way before you were around. Carl
I've
Sagan.
heard him around here and there.
Yeah, he was a wonderful, imaginative, intelligent person who could really speak to the public about science. And I arranged a debate with him about religion and science. And we were going to do a public debate on it because he was calling a lot of things that I appreciate and are very attached to. He was calling them superstitions, and I thought that was a bad word for them. So I arranged with him, and he agreed we were going to have a debate on this issue, but he developed cancer at that point, and we were not able to carry it out. But I really have always been grateful to him that a scientist, I think it is possible, and that's been a model in my mind. It's possible to question what science is, not to say we want a non-scientific world, but to say that the science itself could be adjusted so that it could embrace some of the mysteries that we then leave to other areas, other methods.
What other arguments would you have laid out for Carl Sagan in that debate if it would have taken place?
Well, I would have made this argument that I just did of saying that religion is not there to explain things, and we don't have to explain everything, but we do need to have some relationship with things that we don't really understand. Or when you talk about the planets in motion, you'd say, well, we understand these. We understand now what a planet is, and it's foolish to say that they can have any effect on human life. Well, let's be a little more open-minded. Let's see if maybe looking at these planets look at them imagistically, trying to think of a more poetic way of looking at the planets. Then through that poetic view, maybe they may have more power than only their scientific existence. And what you have to do is to be able to appreciate how the validity of religious ritual and validity of mythology, because the stars are mainly mythological. Their names are all mythological. So the days of our week are mythological. Mythology is here right with us, but we don't know how to deal with it. So I would like to have talked to a scientist and try to let him know that it's a very intelligent way of looking at these things that is not scientific and yet valid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned how we take a lot of things in religion very literally. Things that maybe are meant to be read or perceived figuratively. What exactly are we seeing literally that we can sort of change our point of view and perspective on?
Well, as I was just saying, we could look at the stars in the sky at night in a night sky and notice their positions and how they move, and the age-old ways of looking at these patterns that are in the sky and relating those patterns to what goes on in our own lives. To look at our birth chart, the birth chart showing where the planets were at the time of our birth. That, of course, scientifically it doesn't mean anything, but poetically, looking at it poetically, it describes our situation the moment we were born. So the astrologer wants to know where and when exactly you were born. And that's important because that is an important part of the ritual. So you find out this is about your timing of your life, looking at astrology. Now, when John Dee did it for England, he did it for the Queen Elizabeth, who wanted to have her coronation on a really important, good time. So she asked him to look at the stars and see where would the stars be in their best position, where I could have my coronation. It's play. It's a kind of play, but it's very serious. And it brings in then a whole different perspective and imagination of what's going on here, about cosmic timing and about being in relationship to the whole world. All of those things are there, and only astrology could bring that in. We human beings have lived in an astrological world all the way up until about 500 years ago. And totally astrological the whole time. But we think we're smarter now because we think that's silly to do that. I think we've lost a great deal, losing that sense of cosmic time.
Is this sort of the intellect or some sort of intellectual arrogance stepping in and sort of seeing past civilizations, ancient civilizations, as lesser than? Because we've had a lot of experts here on the show talk about the mysteries of the ancient civilizations and truly the power and the magic that those civilizations brought. Why are we seeing the past through this lens of, we're way more superior than ancient cultures?
I think it's very simple psychology. We have been successful, obviously, evidently, in many ways through this materialistic science and the technology that came out of it. I mean, we're talking to each other today, on computers. That's pretty marvelous. I think I always feel that my Mac laptop is tremendous. I give it great honor. So I think it's wonderful. It's a short step from that to thinking, boy, aren't we great? And we know so much more than people of the past because they didn't have one of these things, one of these gadgets, and we do. They didn't know anything. And look at what they say. We don't understand what they're talking about, so we think they're stupid. I have done some work in medicine over the years, and I remember reading histories of medicine where they have been extremely arrogant in relation to the past, saying that people in the past knew nothing. As a matter of fact, when you look at some of those earlier medical textbooks, you find a great deal of insight into illness that we've lost. And I think we would be much better off if we knew more about it. So the arrogance that we've had is understandable. It's very understandable. But it lets us know that we're pretty naive and immature, that we can't get over that problem. To succumb to that kind of arrogance, it's naive, it's immature. So we need a psychological maturity to go along with our scientific development.
Yeah, to bring this conversation sort of full circle and going back to the third M that for the audience to have some context, we set an intention to evoke what we called the 4 M's, which was mystery, the mystical, the myth, and magic. Going to the third M, the myth, I'm really curious to know your current sort of perception of the the movies and the stories that we tell right now in modern civilization, and if you're interested in seeing them through the lens of mythology, and sort of maybe if the future civilizations are going to see these stories like Avatar, like Marvel movies, are they going to see that as sort of their mythology? I've been always really curious, because we're creating these sort of heroes in our modern time, which are in the form of, these characters in Iron Man and all the superheroes that we have. And a lot of the movies that I've seen recently are deeply rooted in just mythological storytelling. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective on that.
Well, yes. When you study mythology, you can see various myths in life everywhere around you. And yes, the movies may be quite graphic because they look like mythology, and maybe they share some qualities of mythology. But I think also you find myth everywhere. So, for example, as a therapist, I may have someone sitting across from me and they're looking very sad about their father. And I'm thinking, wow, this is Hamlet sitting right in front of me, right across from me. Now, that's from Shakespeare, but Shakespeare's characters have mythic standing. So I would say if I'm seeing that in this person, Hamlet, that helps me get insight. It helps orient me toward what's going on there, and with a deeper story. And if I educate myself in mythology, I will be able to have more, my imagination will be educated and trained more to see this myth and wherever it may appear. So it may be in these movies like you're describing, but some other movies, like movies about what's going on in the politics, in the world politics. You can certainly see myth at work there. And you see it quickly if you're familiar with mythology. You see it right away. Oh yeah, that's what's happening here. You see a love story where someone's been completely tapped by love. You say, well, I know this myth. This is Aphrodite.
I know how that's going to end.
I know how it's going to end. I've studied it very carefully, read it in many different versions. So yes, I think that the deep sense of myth can help us. That's why I think I've always felt that if I were teaching a training program in psychotherapy, I would include a course on mythology, so that people could have that ability to see the mythic and what is happening in ordinary life.
Yeah, it's almost like you're stepping into the matrix when you start seeing the world through the lens of archetypes and mythology. That's super interesting. Thank you for mentioning that, because I feel like it's a field where we can learn a lot from, and might not be so highly regarded nowadays because people are so focused in the sciences and the technology. So yeah, I really, really appreciate that. Even in my own life, when I started looking at astrology, you were going to say something.
Well, that's all right. There's just one thing I wanted to say before we finish, and that is another M I would like to mention is music. I've been a musician all my life, a classical musician. I studied composition for many years, and I love arranging music and writing music and playing. I play the piano every day, and I feel that the things we're talking about here, seeing myth, I feel music is very similar. That I think musically when I write a book, and I am hearing music when I listen to a client in therapy, and the forms of music, what goes on in music. It's part of life. We are musical beings. And if you know music, know it with some intimacy. Then you can see it in human life all the time, just very similar to myth.
And sort of, because when I hear about music, I hear, there's sound playing. And just to tie into this new concept that you're developing around silence, what is the value also behind just being in a state of nothingness, of silence, of no action? than actually, having to be constantly on the move, doing, emailing, texting, TikTok nowadays.
Yeah.
What is the power of silence?
Well, the power of silence and also other forms of emptiness is to allow yourself to be present without. There's a way in which all these other things, all these activities we get engaged in, all the things we have around us, all the voices talking to us all day long, all of that prevents us from really hearing ourselves and being aware that we exist on our own. Emptiness can be very, very helpful. When again, going back to when I was a monk, we lived in a quiet place pretty much. We weren't supposed to say a word after 9 p.m., from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. And the rest of the day was quiet anyway. We ate in silence about maybe 3/4 of the time.
Huh.
And so I grew up in that silence and quiet, and that's a kind of emptiness, and emptying out of all the activity and the sounds that are around. And that the silence that emerges, the emptiness of sound there, that emerges is very calming, and it allows yourself to hear yourself, to know yourself better, and to know your world better because you're able to be closer to it without all those other distractions. So I feel that this book that I've written is called The Eloquence of Silence, but it's actually about emptiness of all kinds. And I think emptiness it's a teaching from India and from other places. It's big in Zen Buddhism in particular, and I'm very happy that Zen Buddhists have endorsed my book. I got a number of the leading Zen Buddhists, which really made me feel good because I feel that that's what I'm trying to do, trying to bring emptiness down to earth where we can not just make it a very abstract and difficult concept, but something we can live every day of our lives all the time by emptying out in terms of sound or possessions or activities or words, all these things. Empty out, and I think we'd be much better off.
So one of the final questions I wanted to ask you is, if silence is a way that we can begin to start taking care and nourishing our soul, what else does the soul need?
The soul needs so many things. The soul needs good food. And I often suggest to the people who come to me for therapy that they take cooking classes because cooking is so valuable to the soul. To be able to get vegetables and other foods and prepare them and develop recipes or get recipes or learn really how to do it well, to get people together and to provide a dining environment where people really have pleasure and joy and enjoy of being together. Food does so much of that. So that's one area. It's huge. That would bring more soul to anything. It still does. So I really advocate that. The arts, the fine arts, music, visual arts, dance, drama, all of it is. All the arts are. They speak directly to the soul. They speak directly to. They are the speech of the soul. And I think if we could do it more soulfully. I'm not one who's in favor of art education too much, maybe to an extent, but I don't like the translating the experience of art into ideas. I think the ideas can be valuable as secondary, but the primary experience is the encounter of the art. The encounter between you and an art object is so important. So the arts are huge. We could bring soul to politics so that politics was done less literally and less acting out of emotion and with more reflection and more poetic sense and more spiritual awareness, because the spiritual activity is also part of the life of the soul. So we go on and on. There's much more, but those are some of the main things.
I love that. And also, what should the soul, or what may the soul avoid to become its highest state, become its highest potential? What are some of the things or ideas that we can start avoiding?
Well, I don't think about it that way too much, but I suppose we could avoid activities that are soulless, places that are soulless. A lot of people, I think, when they think of going on a holiday or a vacation somewhere, think of a soulless place to go. It's not a good idea. Go someplace that will really nurture your soul, not a place that will just give you an escape. So much what we do is escape. Don't go into religions that aren't worthy of you. They will really twist you around. And so if you can go to some religious, I definitely think you can get a lot from all the religions of the world. I'm a great fan of all the religions, but not these institutions that are soulless. And that means you have to be very careful, very selective in where you go in that direction. Be very careful how you get educated. A lot of people go into the field of psychology. I remember when I was teaching in a psychology department once, all the students coming in I'd ask them, why do you want to study psychology? And they'd say they want to help people. And the first course they took was statistics. And I thought, this is not the way to start helping people. You have to start counting. But that's what we do. And psychology, the word itself means the logos of the psyche, the logos of the soul. And we've made it into, a science and a laboratory thing and measuring how many people do this and how many people do that. I'd avoid psychology of that kind altogether.
Wow. Thomas, you have a fascinating worldview from all the wisdom that you've acquired through your years. I truly appreciate you for just being so generous with sharing the teachings that you've gained, and giving back as well to humanity and the younger generations as well, so we can take on sort of that legacy and continue seeking and eventually just having a brighter understanding of the world. We end every podcast with a final question called the time capsule question. But before that, I just want to ask you, where would you send people to connect with you? You mentioned the new book, Eloquence of Silence, that is coming out next week. We're in May right now, so that'll probably be out when people are listening to this. Where else would people go to connect further with your work?
I have a website called thomasmoresoul.com, thomasmoresoul.com. I teach a course online called Soul Psychology, and it's life transforming, believe me. It's a wonderful course. You can find information about that on my website. Otherwise, I've written 32 books now, and they are almost all available online, various places wherever you buy books. So, I could recommend those to find out what I'm doing. I owe a great deal to Carl Jung and James Hillman. Hillman was my close friend who died about 10 years ago. And so his books I'd recommend to you. And I wrote a book, an anthology of his work called A Blue Fire. So you can find out about Hillman and me in one volume if you'd like. And it's in paperback. That would be a good book to get.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Now for the time capsule question. We ask this at the end of every podcast, and it's so interesting the responses we get, because this question sort of takes us around 15 to 20 years into the future. And in this scenario, you are given a time capsule. You are given the opportunity to put in anything in this time capsule that you could possibly imagine, knowing that this time capsule is going to be opened by the next generation of leaders. Sort of right now, the youth, the younger generations of now are going to open this in 15, 20 years time, when they're going to be in leadership positions in all different fields around the world, from politics to academics to psychology to psychotherapy. The leaders of those fields are going to open this time capsule, and they're going to gain anything that you want to put in there to help them build and create the new earth. You can literally stretch the imagination as far as you can, include anything you want in there. It doesn't actually have to fit in a time capsule, but what would you leave behind to the young generations?
I feel like it's one of these capsules you send off to Mars, that. So my answer would be similar to that. I would put in it a recording of Glenn Gould playing J.S. Bach, one of the most profound artistic experiences I think anyone can have. And I would probably include a little book of the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. It's going back time. It's 200 years before this time, but I think now we are beginning to appreciate what an extraordinary woman she was, and both in her life and in her writing. So I would put her in there for sure. And I would also include the best translations of sacred texts that we have now, that we know and value today. I would like, for example, the Tao Te Ching, the Psalms, the Song of Songs, some Sufi stories, maybe some videos of Sufi dancing, and great Jewish storytellers, and the Gospels for sure, and especially the Gospel of John, which is about the relationship between me, I, and that which is beyond me.
Wow.
I think that would give us a good start.
Amazing. And on the top of the time capsule, there's a spot where you can leave a question behind, sort of this like a self-reflective, contemplative question, when these next generations are going to open the time capsule. They'll read your question. What would you leave behind?
As a question?
As a question, yeah.
I think one of the most difficult questions that has never really been answered at all is, who are the animals? And understanding what the animals are, what is our best relationship with them?
That'll take us down a rabbit hole. We'll answer that one on round 2 if we get the chance to do this again. Brother, thank you so much for your open heart and just coming on here with such great energy and sharing so much wisdom with us. I really appreciate you.
Emilio, I really also very much appreciate your style. And one of the things I liked about the way you do an interview is that you're able to keep moving along. People can't do that. You're able to cut into whatever the conversation is at the moment and move it to the next step. That's fantastic. And to listen carefully. And so I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. That really means a lot, brother. Thank you.